Hello, Soya.
Hello,
Yes,
Jinsu.
it's nice to see you again.
Nice
How
to
are
see
you?
you again. I'm
What's the weather
good.
today?
Just the same, around the good temperature to have a walk outside. It's really
Oh,
nice.
it's good to see you again. The Korea in here is very, very hot, and there was a very huge flood before, like 1 week ago, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people hurt it, and there's some about uh, I I don't remember the numbers, but there are some people died last week. Yeah,
A lot of
it is because
casualties.
of the climate change, but we will
Mm-hmm.
discuss about the one of the policy today. So what is topic today?
So, in the previous episode, I've explained the economics of climate change, what the carbon market is, and how it's categorized into voluntary carbon market and compliance carbon market. Today, lead by Jinsu, we are going to deep dive into the complication behind the emission trading scheme, which is shortened, we just call it ETS. It is being implemented in multiple countries, including European Union, California, China, and Korea. So we'll also discuss how companies account for the purchase of emissions allowances. But Jinsu, can you explain what is emission allowance and how does this work?
Absolutely. Just a quick reminder. I think I told you before there is a two very powerful climate change policies called carbon tax and uh, carbon trade system, and the ETS, the called emission trading system, is basically is a carbon trade system. It was implemented in US like in 1960s, and it was a very successful to reduce
Hmm.
the pollutions in US. And but however, the the ETS that we think is actually implemented in EU at first time in 2005, and at the time, actually EU considers carbon tax rather than ETS. Why do you think E- EU tried to implement carbon tax rather than ETS?
I would say, well, as you said, is that ETS started from the United States, North American based. So maybe there was difference in their social system, I guess.
So, yeah, ETS and the carbon tax basically is the same mechanism, so it does not matter in the long terms. But in, there are a lot of difference between two policies. For example, carbon tax is basically put tax on the fuels, so and it always fix the price of the fuel. So basically, this is very not flexible like ETS system, and ETS looks like giving more room and the opportunity for company to improve their efficiency. So there is a huge technology innovations happen in ETS system. That's why a lot of government these days prefer ETS systems. If we look at mm, this graph, this report is from ICAP report in 2023 and 23.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the maps, the blue countries uh, are the countries with ETS. You can see there is a California and East US and the EU and China, Korea, and New Zealand. And and interestingly, there is a Kazakhstan.
Wow, that's interesting. I can see clearly from the map that there's more countries implementing ETS rather than the carbon tax. But it's interesting to see California and just the colors there. Like, can you tell me more about the California? What kind of approach did they use?
Uh, Actually, we should start from EU, but we can talk about California first. The
Sure.
California also has a very very powerful, what should I say, ETS system, but there is a very unique function uh, in California ETS. So basically, they give the free allowance to the. By the way, as you might know, a lot of
Mhm.
emissions actually come from power generations, right?
Right. Yes.
So so most ETS policy is highly related to the power generations companies,
Mm.
right? For example, like the RGGI, which is located in the east of the US, only apply for the power generations. And
So
and
is the California a state that has to that has relation with the energy industry?
yes, and what I want to try to explain is about how they treat the power sectors. I mean, what I mean is like in California, they don't give the free allowance to power generation. They gave the free allowance to the company which distribute electricity to the consumer directly. This is weird. And the panel generate company have to buy free allowance from the company distribution companies.
Wow, that's interesting because in Korea it's the opposite usually, right?
Yes, it's very opposite. I will explain why. This
Mm-hmm.
is because Soyan, am I wait a minute. Uh so basically California ETS system is very successful because of this kind of policy. For example, uh, because they give the free allowance to electricity distribution companies, so the power generations have to buy 100% allowance from their company. So there is a governance between them. Actually, it's unlike the Korean structures. They are all of them are private sectors, and they are from different company, which means uh, this become auction policies. The auction policy means that you have to buy all of your emission allowance from the government or other companies.
That must be stressful for the company who generates energy. But oh yeah, sorry.
Yes, you are totally right. It was too stressful for the power generations to buy the emission allowance all the time from the electricity distribution company, and which made them to install renewable energy more. So they thought like, oh, I was the like more powerful than distribution company before, but these days I have to ask them a lot of things, ask them to give me more cheap emission allowance more, and they say, oh, never mind, I just do renewable energy. And then there's a lot of like energy revolution in California, and then it was so successful policy in our history. And the funny thing is, the California state was so smart. They asked electricity distribution companies to uh, use this budget only for the discount of the electricity price.
Wow, that's very smart.
yeah, and all renewable energy. So it was a very very smart policy, so that even distribution companies have to uh, uh, cannot raise the electricity price, so that the consumers were protected from by the this kind of carbon pricing policy. And actually they were happy, all of them are happy except the power generation companies.
But yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and hopefully this kind of system maybe could be applied to Korean energy system.
No, it is impossible in my perspective, because I already told you this is all the private companies. But unfortunately, Korea, there is only one electricity distribution company, and they are actually own the power generation. So it could be nonsense for them to use this kind of policy. It is very smart. This shows how they use this kind of policy wisely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
uh
definitely brought a smooth transition for the energy industry to go into the clean energy sector.
yes, it is. So actually it happened, and there are a lot of research papers mention the reason why California becomes so clean, because it is largely up to this kind of policy, and there was a lot of subsidy for this renewable energy, but mainly the power generations company tried to get a state wanted to stay the more powerful position from the left distribution companies. So it was very interesting policy. So, uh, can we talk about the
We can go back
uh,
to the EU.
yes? Uh, Before that, can you see this clearly? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Uh, Before that, I want to talk about the coverage itself. So even though one country tried to start the ETS, it does not mean they cover all of the emission of the nations. For example, Switzerland only covered 12% of the emissions of the country. That means actually it means a lot. It means a lot. Even for example, Korea covered very high rate. Where is Korea?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 74% of the Korea emission is covered by ETS system. But unfortunately, uh, even though it covers a lot, it could be very useless if we doesn't have any like a strict standard and the policy. If the so basically ETS and the cabin trade system is highly depends on the amount of the allowance distributed by the governments. Every year, the allowance is given by government, which means government can decide the what should I say? Can decide the quality of the ETS, or the the rule
The
for.
volume of the emissions.
Yes, and it is also linked to the NDC. So if one countries have if a one country has a very strong and a very ambitious NDC and emission targets, then ETS system could be very very powerful. For example, EU only cover about 45% of the emission trade system, but EU ETS is much more stronger and powerful to the society, because it has a more strict and more ambitious emission target for the specific sectors. So
Mm.
the more mm, the coverage actually means part of the policy does not shows the shows the goodness of this policy. So, and So actually, we use it as a very we cover very different sectors. But as you can see, all of these countries, except the Tokyo and the Japan countries, they all of the cover the power sectors. As I told you, power sector, it is so important. And there is another reason why ETS focus on the power sectors, because ETS is a kind of it's one of the types of the policy of the carbon pricings, and carbon pricing is so good and a very efficient policy in my perspective. But unfortunately, it could be very bad for our, I mean, domestic industry.
Domestic industry,
So
but
what I mean is,
mm,
if
isn't it
we,
good for country? Sorry.
yeah, yeah, you can give me any.
Isn't it good for a country if country makes emission reductions? It achieves the NDC, but how does that affect the domestic economy?
What I want to try to explain is that uh, it could be downgrade the country's compatibility of the export industry. For example, there is a one company who make uh, which makes iron steel, and like and that and that they are the only region who pay carbon pricings, right? Carbon
Mm.
price, then it could be very unfair to compete with other countries, right?
Mm. Okay.
So all of the nations have to consider this kind of economic factors, so they should, so even though it is a very important, and the climate change is so important, but they always do not want to downgrade their industry, right?
That's why they're so careful about expanding the emission coverage in the ETS, right?
Yes, and so that's why they are very cautious and do not want to implement in the sector where export a lot of goods to abroad. But
Yeah, I remember EU ETS have included the aviation industry to the ETS this time, and it was a big news. But let me know. Please correct me if I got it wrong.
yeah, you can say anything. Uh, it that kind of, and actually it is avoided from another reasons. But my point is, power sectors, the power generation only generate power for the domestic consumer, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, usually, because electricity itself is so hard to export to other country, except some, if we,
Mm,
unless they don't have a grid, a connection between countries, right?
right. That's why Korea. We always say it's very hard to get energy supply from the other countries.
Yes, and except the EU, there are very few countries who of which want to a grid system with other country. This is because it is highly linked to the security issue. Imagine like Ukraine and the Russians war, and once the one country tried to cut the energy supply, then other country could be painful. So that is why they always are very cautious and not to export or import energy from other countries, especially in terms of the electricity supply, because it is highly related to the uh, high technologies and data industry.
Mm. In terms of energy security, so having a lot of renewable energy plant would be helpful in this case.
Yes. So the sector which is a mainly function and have a good uh, consumer in domestic market could be easily covered by ETS. For example, like waste sectors or like forestry and agriculture could be a good example. But industry, if you sometimes the government hesitate to implement very harsh ambitious target emission target to that. I think it is quite a